in the chat window there in front of me. And it's lovely to be here in wherever you are, in some sense, there in the room with you, quarantined away or not, depending on your circumstances, in a hospital, at home, in some workplace, or wherever you might be in the world. This is a concert right here from Big Red Studio in Corbett, Oregon, to no studio audience or extremely small engineer studio audience, and sponsored by the National Union of Public and General Employees in Canada, I'm very happy to say. And for these sponsored gigs, we're using fancy equipment here. Hopefully it sounds good out there. It sounds really good in my earphones, but there's foreboding in the air, waiting for an earthquake. Pandemic spreading, no telling how it might remake a world so divided in so many, many ways. Anyone can see it's no way to greet such days when you can shut your borders, but it'll barely slow the spread with 1 million people homeless and not enough hospital beds. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. The foreboding in the air can get only thicker as we see our leaders passing blame and getting sicker. A crashing economy, leaders fraught with indecision, only capable of thinking like bought-off politicians. Not enough testing kits, and the ones you got were broken, but hey, the president has spoken. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. 1 million people wake up in the morning thinking thoughts they never had till they found out they were sinking on a cruise ship full of holes where if you can't catch the breeze, there are no fences tall enough to keep out the disease. Lifting every boat or watching them all sink, ready or not, we're standing on the brink. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. Contain an epidemic like in Wuhan or in Seoul, or watch a catastrophe take its toll. Hide behind our gates, cowering, afraid, or organize our neighbors in mutual aid. In synchronicity, such great things can be done. A planet to lose or a world to be won. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. And it's I can see I see the names of Canadians on that screen. That's good, because this is a concert that is in Canada, except that I'm not there. It's sort of like when Paul Robeson sang across the border from Blaine, Washington, except I'm further from the border, and I'm right in your room somewhere. And that may be a big room or a small room, or it's a room with internet access. This can be said. And this is a song, this is a concert about solidarity. Which is a viral thing in a very good way. And it's very much what we need around the world right now. But here in the U.S., in some sense, you could say that compared to some other places, we maybe need more of it, because when you have a less competent government trying to, that's actually causing all kinds of problems. Then it makes things more difficult and more requiring of more solidarity. The situation was pretty dismal before the pandemic began here in the US. Just putting in things into context, I thought I'd put some things into a little bit of context here. We'll go back to even further way back, but just going back to last year, there was a trial. If you go to Pima County in the Sonoran Desert Lands, you'll find the town of Ajo among the cactus stands. The only town you'll see, the only water too. When someone is thirsty, there's no question what you do. For well over a century, it was a normal thing to have an extra jug of water that you might bring. In the harsh Sonoran, Arizona summer heat, we'd rather give the vultures something else to eat. You didn't ask where I was going, nor where I'd been. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you gave me clothes. I was a stranger. You let me in. I have this book here, a story I learned well. I always thought I understood the tale that it tells. It's spelled out very clearly in Matthew 25. What a good Christian does when a stranger arrives. You didn't ask where I was going, nor where I'd been. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you gave me clothes. I was a stranger. You let me in. Now there's a crackdown with life and death on trial. The only place with water for 100 miles. Facing 20 years in prison is a very mighty rod. Now all of us are forced to choose between Caesar and God. You didn't ask where I was going, nor where I'd been. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you gave me clothes. I was a stranger. You let me in. You let me in. You let me in. I need new glasses, and I can't see all those comments, and looking forward to reading them all afterwards, but or developing better eyesight all of a sudden, but that's okay. The weirdest thing about doing concerts for the internet is is the lack of applause, and I'm I think an applause track. I'm gonna have to get like a pedal or something, but that's gonna be weird. So if somebody else operated it, then it might be all right, but then still weird. And then I have to examine my mental health and wonder why. What is the thing about applause anyway? Who needs it? Silence is beautiful, but we're all getting a lot of that lately. A lot of that. I mean, silence is relative too. It's a very relative concept. I don't really feel like I get a lot of silence because my refrigerator is so loud. But if there's any other musicians and audio engineers, you all understand where I'm coming from. That's only one of my favorite things about Big Red Studios. There's no refrigerator in here. This is live, folks, in case you didn't know. And that's why you're having to listen to me tune so much, And these days you might be getting used to that idea and, sitting through this tuning. Usually what happens is you look at the stats later and you lost half your audience because you had to tune the guitar. Well, oh well. This is the last time there was armed uprising in Britain. The circumstances were basically people were living really close to the bone, barely able to survive, and then suddenly all the employers at the mines in Wales cut the wages really by a lot. All of a sudden, this sudden something like 30% of the population was suddenly unemployed. It was so familiar, and they had a rebellion and now they're going to give us money, apparently, instead. 1831, the age of industry begun. For the working folk of Wales, life was short. With wages cut again, it was only sensible that then folks took over, shut down the debtors' court. The gentry pulled the wire, told their men to open fire and restore the rule of their estate. But as the night descended and the battle ended, the soldiers had all fled behind a gate. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. Message went out east and west to put the gentry to the test. The cavalry was ambushed and turned back. After so long playing defense, the time had come now when the workers were the ones on the attack. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. The Crown sent soldiers by the score till order was restored. Then came Dick Penderyn's execution, another martyr for the cause, meant to give us pause the next time people call for revolution. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. Nicholas, can you just scroll down on that window of chat so I can see something right over there? Cool. I don't know why it doesn't just do that. Maybe. Okay, perfect. Not that I can see any better, but at least I can see the names of people. I can see there are people from several different countries anyway watching, and I'll look forward to looking at those later. That's another way to lose an audience is read your chats and talk about them instead of singing songs. And I'm slowly starting to pay attention to these kinds of things because actually those statistics maybe actually make a difference. Maybe it means something. We understand the world through metadata now as we're isolated. It's like more and more like the Matrix. maybe I'll sing about that too. But for now, I thought I'd sing about the last time there was a really, really massive corporate bailout, which is what's happening here. And I think it's one of those, at least for many years it was the case, I would say, that if you saw a cheery headline, it was invariably going to the byline. Is that what it's, when the name of the town, it's invariably going to be Reykjavik, Iceland. It's like my favorite headlines. It says, banker begins serving prison sentence. There's been 40 such headlines in Iceland so far. So it's not that uncommon that if you happen to look at an Icelandic news source, good 40 times in the past 10 years, the headline is, banker begins serving prison sentence. Iceland is an island with 500,000 or so Vikings, mostly known for volcanoes, hot springs, and fishing, known for its welfare state for being good and socialistic, certainly not known for being corrupt or nepotistic. But in the USA and Europe, when they were deregulating banks, Iceland's politicians took bribes and joined their ranks. Soon you had a situation one would think just couldn't be, a bank whose debt was worth 10 times the country's GDP. When Wall Street imploded, sure enough it spread. Banks all over the world were floating in the red. All over the world, governments made the plan to cut spending and raise taxes on the working woman and working man. The banks were bailed out while the people had to pay. But in Iceland, people thought there must be a better way. And the earth stood still a moment. Fear was struck in every top. When Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. It's a sing-along, by the way, out there. So, you can sing along, take a video of yourself singing along, and then do something. That's become the new thing. This is very Matrix-like, but it's kind of fun. Folks were in the streets in Reykjavik and just couldn't be ignored. They said, this is a debt we Icelanders can't afford. Let's guarantee deposits of all our people, yes indeed. But as for all the speculators motivated by their greed to make really dumb investments, to them Iceland said, good luck. Sorry for your losses, but we don't really give a fuck. The 1% all trembled when they took away the trough. When Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. Gordon Brown called them terrorists, said we cannot let this stand. Who do these peacenik blondes think they are in Iceland? They threatened isolation and economy in flames, but the Icelanders said sorry, but the banks can settle their own claims, though that might be harder for them now that they're under house arrest, or else they fled the country as they were most unwelcome guests. And now Reykjavik's recovery just makes the fat cats cough, since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. If you haven't heard of this example, perhaps there's a reason why. The owners of the world don't want this kind of shit to fly. They say we all must pay up in this shakedown by the mob if we can't afford to pay the rent because we don't have a job. They say it's not their problem if we're forever shackled by their debt. We must save the 1% from the fate they should have met. But there is an alternative, though it makes the fat cats scoff, since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. Since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. I think it's been a while since the last time I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, but last time I was there were a lot of signs that a tenants' rights organization had been putting up, quoting the very right-wing premier there at the time, saying, who had said that the government of British Columbia is no longer in the housing business, and as rents are becoming extremely more and more unaffordable in that fast-growing city that's leaving so many people behind. So much like this city near here, Portland, where I live. And but the epitome of this problem, of this chronic health crisis that so many of the cities of this country especially are already, it's Los Angeles. Another pre-pandemic song, BC. It's 2019, looking around at the tents and trash and excrement scattered on the ground. So many mansions overlooking the sea. Stretch limos, Rolls Royces, and movie stars all over Los Angeles County. It's 2019. And one thing I know is most people wish we could rewind to a couple of decades ago. Before the rents tripled, folk began to move out into their cars, into their tents, where drivers look on however loudly you shout. It's 2019. But in a black and white photo, it could be 1929. Wherever you go, in every single neighborhood, hungry people wonder why. Some make billions on a blockbuster, while so many are left out to die. It's 2019, where every 8 hours someone is found cold on the sidewalk beneath the glass and steel towers. In the wealthiest nation in all of human history, so far from paradise, so close to Walt Disney. It's 2019. There's no Dust Bowl, just real estate speculators and all the lives they stole. I don't know what to think when I hear the reporters say 1,000 people died last year living on the streets of LA. It's 2019. So here in Portland and in it started, I believe, it's all going so fast, changing so fast. Things are happening very quickly. And but I believe it started in Montreal, somewhere up around there, and it spread to all across Canada and all across the U.S. and spreading to other countries as well. Of course, it would have probably, started in Italy or somewhere else, but in Italy and France and Spain, last I checked, they have already suspended rent and mortgage payments and a lot of other things. They've basically I think they're calling it freezing the economy. Here they're only talking about it. They have, there's been a suspension on evictions, and that led me and my family to stop paying the rent in solidarity with all those people who can't pay the rent, and also because if they're going to do a $2 trillion bailout and send us all into a bigger depression as a result by bailing out corporations, then if we don't join the rent strike, we're never going to get any of that bailout later. And it's time to stand up, especially if you got a moratorium on evictions. Why not? Even a moratorium on late fees and filing evictions. It almost sounds like a government that's in favor of human beings, or at least terrified of them. But so my advice is not to pay the rent, but not to kill your landlord. And this is a song about that. It's also sometimes very difficult, even if you wanted to kill your landlord, if your landlord is a corporation and you can't really, it's not really a person. And they raise your rent based on some kind of a mathematical formula having to do with stockholders and having nothing to do with wages. And it makes you want to strangle the corporation, but nobody's told me how you can successfully strangle a corporation yet. Although in Belfast they say one at a time is the way to do it, which is still not exactly clear, but at least it's getting there. It's an explanation of some kind. If your rent has doubled, there are different ways to cope with the situation and make it through your days. There are therapeutic methods, such as playing darts with a picture of your landlord's private body parts. You can get a roommate or 2 or 3 or 4, build a loft and squeeze more beds onto every floor. You can scratch up each Mercedes that you find on your street. Say, piss off yuppie scum to each yuppie scum you meet, but do not kill your landlord. It will not end well. You'll be living rent-free inside a prison cell. You can pay a visit very early in the morn to where your landlord lives, but don't forget the bullhorn. You can form a samba band, march up and down his road. You can play with firecrackers as you watch them explode. You can sing a song about 1848 when renters burned the mansions down and overthrew the state. You can talk about your landlord, how much you'd like to see him dead. Just make sure it remains only something that you said. Yes, do not kill your landlord. It will not end well. You'll be living rent-free inside a prison cell. You can say hi to your neighbors, organize a meeting, form a tenants union so it won't be something fleeting. Have some demonstrations, make plans for rent strike, create a list of demands, perhaps something like no more rent increases, fix the things that break, get rid of all that mold in the walls, for goodness sake. No more no-cause evictions, no more acting like an ass, no more acting like a member of a feudal ruling class. But do not kill your landlord. It will not end well. You'll be living rent-free inside a prison cell. Those demands at the end, they just seem really, really tame in the current situation. And I retract all of that. I want much, much more. And this, in Montreal, and in Boston and other college towns, I have been, all over California, college towns all over the place. But I know in Montreal, one, because my friend Walter there is the lawyer who defended the students there, so that's how I heard about it. But in many different cities, they've been, many listeners out there, especially certain ones, are aware. Students have been getting kicked out of their student housing on only days' notice, so that they can go home, often to older parents and and grandparents sometimes, in order to infect them. And this is the big increase in infections that's happening in some places, like in China, is students returning from North America. Who have been kicked out of their housing. And in other cases in California, they've been consolidating in order to save money, consolidating the students who are trying to ride out the virus and shelter in place. And then they move them into another building so they're all closer together. Welcome to the Matrix. This is another song about landlords, which is less friendly than the last one. It's a bit of a good cop, bad cop kind of scenario here. This is the one where the landlord gets more nervous. Writing you this letter because among the choices it's probably better than listening to voices raging in my head saying point and shoot, and after you're dead your face meets my boot. I don't know your name, It's better that way, cause I can't play this game. Who knows what I'll say? I feel like I'm burning. I've had it up to here. It's time that you were learning the meaning of fear. I live in these apartments like your private property among your residents. Most of us agree that you're a piece of shit. How does that make you feel? We don't like you one bit, and that's for real. We think you're a thief, that you don't care. Seems your one belief is whatever the market will bear. Whatever you can get away with, what you can make us pay. If we ever get justice, you should fear that day. Landlord. Landlord. But it's not just you, it's all your kin. The things you do cause the state we're in. You bribe the politicians so they'd let you off lead. Now the legal situation's just the one you need. For you to make millions, for profits to be high. But even billions won't be with you when you die. I hope you find the death you seek, meet the devil that you serve. If you live another week, that's more life than you deserve. Landlord. Landlord. In the class war you're waging, there's no question who is winning. But if there's any justice, this is only the beginning. The next act in the play will be written by the tenants, and until your dying day, you'll be paying penance. Your ass will be seized, that's a fucking given. You profiteers of misery, start spending time in prison. Then you can get a job, figure out what you do best. You can keep the house you live in, but we're taking all the rest. Landlord. 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 Yo, landlord. I didn't mention before singing that terribly angry song that my landlord actually just raised our rent. The landlord, the Randall Group, a corporation that owns buildings up and down the West Coast, dated March 25th, sent me and my family a rent increase, if you can believe that. Weeks into the shutdown, a rent increase on rent that already doubled over the course of the past decade. But getting back to the subject of solidarity, I mean, they're all songs about solidarity, but not necessarily solidarity with big, rapacious corporations. In fact, not at all. But this is the striptease segment of the program. Sometimes that goes very badly, I think. Once I had to change my pants on stage, and because I was wearing leather pants, and they offended vegans so much that I had to actually change my pants into a pink skirt, which it was a process. It was caught on film. If anybody has that film, it was in Washington, D.C., 2004. But anyway, I'm going to move back to the subject of solidarity, and specifically related to Chile, as it happens in both cases, different time periods. But first one is basically about when Pablo Neruda was a very young ambassador in pre-World War II France. And the second song is more around the time that just after Neruda died. And the first song, actually, Neruda was quite involved with organizing the transport of Spanish refugees away from Europe before the war started. Across the ocean wide, where many ships had been, where many long remember those passengers within. All of those whose families were buried or in jail in the killing fields of Spain when the Winnipeg set sail. Across the ocean wide, across the open seas, a world better than the camps, the French authorities threw the people in, and if they lived to tell the tale, they'd be the lucky few when the Winnipeg set sail. Across the ocean wide, the ship was met at bay by the throngs of people who just had to come that day. In 1939, to cheer and cry and say all hail solidarity, when the Winnipeg set sail. Ocean wide was where they had to flee, the thousands upon thousands of Spanish refugees, from the lands of Europe where humanity had failed, to the shores of Valparaiso when the Winnipeg set sail. The ocean wide was where they would remain as dictatorship would rule for half a century in Spain. Torpedoed in 42, now it lies upon the shale. One voyage will outlive her when the Winnipeg set sail. Across the ocean wide. And then a few decades later, the government of Chile had changed quite dramatically from its pinnacle of socialistic achievement to a CIA-backed dictatorship led by a guy named Augusto Pinochet. And in the fall of 1973, it was all over the televisions, all over the world. And some of those people who were watching TV at the time worked at a Rolls-Royce factory in Scotland. Jet fighters bombed the palace. We all watched it on TV. The 11th of September, 1973. All across the world, people cried in vain as we heard stories of the students being tortured and slain. Stories of the workers, shop stewards, and the rest being slaughtered at the new dictator's behest. Labor groups condemned it, said we were on the workers' side, including all the engineers of East Kilbride. People organized a boycott of General Pinochet, who had overthrown Allende with a Hawker Hunter jet. Then a few months later, March of 74, Bob Fulton came to work at the Rolls-Royce factory floor. He looked at the orders that had come in that day and found crates with jet engines from Chile. Jet engines from the Air Force across the ocean wide, sent to be repaired in East Kilbride. It didn't take a minute for Fulton and his mates to come to the decision they would not touch these crates. Soon 4,000 Rolls-Royce workers voted they agreed to stand with the Chileans in their hour of need. Management decried them. The Tories screamed and cussed, but the Hawker Hunter engines were left to sit and rust. Nowhere else on earth were workers qualified to repair the engines sitting there in East Kilbride. It's often hard to know if you've changed anything a whit, but decades later a Chilean general would admit, for a time in Santiago, there were no fighters in the sky, because the whole Chilean Air Force had not one jet that could fly. They may not have changed the world, this group of union engineers, but these crates of metal sat corroding for 4 years. So here's to British labor, how for 4 years it tried to do what could be done from East Kilbride. Jet fighters bombed the palace, we all watched it on TV, the 11th of September, 1973. live tuning. If I break a string, then it's going to be live string changing. Very exciting. That is really nothing to miss. It's among the shocking, we're just dealing with so many shocks at the same time, but among the many shocking things going on is prisoners at Rikers Island in New York are being paid $6 an hour to dig mass graves. And they are being given protective equipment, which won't help them when they go back to the prison, because they're quite likely they're digging their own mass graves, which is very, very horrifying. And then in the hospitals, I don't see how people can be expected to work under those circumstances. They can't. And they're going on strike all over the place. But how do you strike at a hospital like that? It's just a crazy situation. But here's a song about a prison and a prisoner in it. Behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the horrors committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero to whistleblowers everywhere, who helped them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man, the reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, whose sun set long before, were torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused to say precisely which, or to try to clear the mist, or to explain how he's not the same as the other journalists. Behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured As we stand here now, for revealing the war crimes. Why, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is the teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown, a 24-hour-a-day indefinite lockdown behind these prison walls. And farm workers, as you know, I mean, this is becoming mainstream news, so I'm not breaking anything to anybody out there, but the farm workers are not being protected in the United States generally. And this relationship between undocumented farm workers and employers taking advantage of their undocumented status goes back a very long time. The state that I'm in was actually founded as a white homeland. Where Mexicans were not allowed to own property. Along with other people of color. But they were all specifically defined in because white Mexicans were allowed to own property. There was a definition, the Oregon Constitution, which kind of Mexican could own property. True story. My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. So in the midst of these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched 'neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin Golbra, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and the Libertad para la Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us the Legion of Strangers, and they can talk as they may, but from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. There are really, we don't know. I guess I certainly don't. But it seems I'm constantly listening to all kinds of news and interviews, and we don't know a lot about this pandemic. We know a lot about how unprepared most of the world is right now to cope with it. We know about that. But there are a lot of things we don't know. Most importantly, how to vaccinate ourselves. But about the pandemic of 1918, a lot is known. And it's really horrific and very interesting. It bears a lot of resemblance to this one, the way it behaved, apparently. And but the origins of the deadly strain of the pandemic in 1918 came out of the front lines of Europe in the First World War, and the deadly strain was basically a product of the circumstances of the war, which is fascinating. And I won't try to explain that anymore because this is a concert, and you can read the article I read. World War was raging like the earth had never seen. A whole generation lined up in trenches with killing machines. But aside from a few islands and some mountain peaks, the pandemic killed more people in just 24 weeks. No one knows where it began. Speculation's gone on for years. The trenches of Europe is where the deadly strain appears. From packed trains and hospitals around the globe, it spread, the war strain of the virus that left so many dead. The death toll was unequal, but barely anywhere was left untouched, though the greatest share of dying was reserved for the poorest colonies of the empires and their wars that created this disease. If you have a couple hours, then do something with me. Conduct a little research into your family tree. If you look into it, it won't take long. Quite likely you will find in 1918 you left an ancestor behind. Pandemic knew no borders. It went from the front lines, which had increased its deadliness as if by design. It circled the whole planet, so many people died. They dug mass graves everywhere, put your relatives inside. A world war was raging like the earth had never seen. Whole generations lined up, killing machines. But aside from a few islands and some mountain peaks, the pandemic killed more people in just 24 weeks. It's really weird coincidence that after years of working on memoir writing, I mean, I guess I spent much of my 40s kind of like working on this project of writing memoirs and scrapping and writing and scrapping. It was just like a writing exercise, basically. And eventually I finished writing one that I liked enough to publish, and I put it out as an audio memoir, which I've been releasing every week over the past few weeks. Past 12 weeks, in fact. There's 16 episodes. One per week I've been putting out, and it's just like how much the world changes with each episode I'm putting out is ridiculous. But then what is even more ridiculous is the name of the memoir is Waiting for Something to Happen, which so it might be my fault. It's like tempting fate with a name like that. But some things can happen, and then things can change, and then the circumstances can be completely different, and then you consult the experts, and they're not experts anymore, and that's where we're at. Whatever you thought was a progressive idea yesterday is now conservative, and a lot of people are dying. First, you have to have a problem. That part isn't hard. The second step is everybody realizing they're like you. They're holding the same card. Step 3 is finding there's a tactic when everyone believes it could be true. That if all the people work collectively, there just might be something we can do, and everything can change. So quick. Congressmen and businessmen and TV sets will try hard to make sure it isn't so. You don't have a problem. And if you do, it's not the same problem. If it is, there's just nowhere you can go. But it's happened many times. The history is rich, though we easily forget how a meme can take hold and grab you, how it can spread out like a net, and everything can change. So quick. They'll say we are lost, or we're dreaming, or they'll make a dream for us. They'll try to come up with a good story about why we belong at the back of the bus, about why we belong in this position, about how we don't know what we meant, about how there most certainly isn't any such thing as the 99%, but everything can change. So quick. Everything can change. So quick. Well, I think I will do one more song, and thank you all so much for listening, and thanks so much to the National Union of Public and General Employees for sponsoring this concert, which has been really fun, particularly since I'm in a really nice recording studio with a wonderful engineer named Billy Oskey, and they're on the other side of the very safe glass wall. If you want to make a recording, if you're a musician and you're not totally broke or whatever, and this studio is like very virus good for the virus, because I'm alone in this room and you can't see the rest of the room, but it's like the room part you see. And plus, there's plenty of time between sessions. Okay. This is one more song about solidarity, and I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I've enjoyed playing for you in some kind of virtual, strange sense, and I will be enjoying it more after I see those comments that are building up there on the screen, and thank you. And this is another, I said that already. I wrote it last summer. If I could live to see the day, say 80 years from now, if I could live to be an old man, I sure hope I'd be hearing how today was the beginning of an historic victory. I didn't come in vain to this beach in Normandy. I wonder, will this be the day when the tide began to turn, when our leaders all around the world all began to learn that hatred, fear, and nationalism won't bring us liberty? I think all that from this beach in Normandy. And as I look around me, comrades falling everywhere, the very ocean crimson red, shells zipping through the air. I hope at least the next generation might get a chance to see something better than this beach in Normandy. Yes, if I weren't full of bullet holes, about to breathe my last, propellers roaring above me as the planes are flying past, I might not be so worried about the future of humanity if I weren't bleeding out on this beach in Normandy. Lastly, if I could make a toast over my corpse, I'd say, here's to the new world once we make the fascists pay. Here's to a world where all peoples live in solidarity, as I die here on this beach in Normandy. No, I can't leave you with that song. That's too depressing. I have to leave you with a song about liberation. We'll stick with the same period. It's still a song about the Second World War, but then I'll really go, I think. Sometimes you make a set list, you think you need to vary it, and then you realize you didn't. This is a song about my friend Katerina's grandmother, who's also named Katerina. Katerina Jakob, long before she took that name, was organizing workers in Hamburg just the same. Organizing beneath the flag of deepest red, a new dawn of peace and freedom clearly shining in her head. Katerina Jakob first was sent to jail when the trappings of democracy all began to fail. She was frequently arrested, in and out of custody, while her first husband was in hiding from the Nazis. Katerina Jakob was acquitted of a crime, but the Gestapo had the last word. They weren't finished with her this time. She was sent to Ravensbrück, a killing hunger at her side. She heard of the execution, how her second husband died. For Katerina Jakob, the end was close at hand. She was on a death march with a ragged, starving band, marching through a forest, being led by the SS. What would happen hours later seemed impossible to guess. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Jakob thought about her children and the friends and comrades taking care of them, not knowing yet if any of them survived, not knowing that soon she'd see her daughters both alive. Katerina Jakob watched the German soldiers fleeing, streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them, she thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. they all sang the Internationale. Katarina Jakob saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies as never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forests beneath a trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Folket die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Folket die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. And if there are any actual German listeners there, I'm sorry for butchering that last part, but thank you very much for listening, and I will see you soon on the internet, and stay safe and do not pay your rent, and I'll see you soon.